Chapter 4 Harbingers of the Sugra Apocalypse that have not yet happened. Introduction. There are various Sugra omens that have not yet occurred or are still disputed by the scholars regarding the issue of whether these omens have occurred in the past or, on the contrary, have not occurred until now. To complete our study is this aspect that we will address in this article. As for the view that all Sugra omens have already happened, that is not correct. In fact, there are some Sugra omens that have not happened until now, as we will explain later. Likewise, the opinion that requires that all Sugra omens must first occur completely before the beginning of the Kubra omens is not an opinion that is supported by the evidence. In fact, there are some Kubra omens whose sequence is continuous with Sugra omens and intertwined with each other until the day of judgment arrives. On the contrary, many of the Sugra omens have not yet occurred and are expected to appear after the arrival of Yaju-Maju, Dajjal, such as the lifting of the Quran, the collapse of the Kaaba, the phenomenon of adultery that occurs everywhere in various forms, and the return of people to paganism. The Sugra omens that have not yet occurred can be classified into two major groups. The first is the Sugra omens, which we do not know what they mean and when they occur. It is these omens that we will discuss in this chapter. Please note that we will not discuss them in their entirety in this chapter. Rather, we will discuss them in full in the section on natural events, which we believe is very relevant to the topic. In this chapter, we have only covered some events that we do not know when they occurred, at least to the best of our knowledge. We will also discuss the various meanings of the signs. Secondly, the Sugra omens that are known for what they mean and when they occur. This sign is usually mentioned in the words Baina Yade as Sa, or the various understandings indicated by the redaction of the hadith that this world will end soon, and related to various things that show the condition of human depravity in every aspect of his life. We will discuss this sign more fully in Chapter 2, after we discuss Yaju and Maju. Notes: the omens we have reviewed here are some of those that both classical and modern scholars have declared to have occurred. But what they describe also contains several possibilities. Therefore, we will also mention some of these interpretations with explanations. A. Various Sugra omens. This discussion covers 9 signs, which we will explain as follows. 1. Muslim countries embargoed. Abu Huraira, may Allah be pleased with him, reported that the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The people of Iraq blocked the dirham and its kafis, the people of Sham blocked the dinar and its mud, and the people of Egypt blocked the irdib and its dinar. But you will return to your original state. You will return to your original state. And you will return to your original state. The flesh and blood of Abu Hurairah will be the witness." Muslim, Al-Fran, Hadith, No. 2897. Abu Nadhara reported that Jabir ibn Abdullah, may Allah be pleased with him, said, "There came a time when the people of Iraq were no longer sent their kofis and dirhams. So we asked, where did the embargo come from? Jabir replied, from the people of Ajam. Then he said again, the time is approaching when the people of Sham will no longer be sent their dinars and muds. So we asked again, from where is the embargo? Jabir replied, from the direction of the Romans who embargoed them. Then, Jabir paused for a moment, and then he spoke again. I heard the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, at the end of time a caliph will appear who will distribute wealth without counting it. Muslim, Al-Fitan, Hadith, No. 2913. Explanation. Scholars differed in their opinions regarding Iraq and the Levant blocking the mud and kafis, and Nawawi said, regarding the meaning of Iraq's withholding of its mud and kafis in the hadith above, there are two well-known opinions. Firstly, that they are no longer subject to jizya in mud or kafis because their people have embraced Islam, and this has indeed happened. The second opinion, which is more popular than the first, is that the non-Arabs and the Romans will dominate the Arabs, and they will forbid the Muslims to use these two measures. It was said, because they will apostatize in the last days, they will withhold what they used to give out of their wealth, for zakah and other things. It was also said, the disbelievers to whom the jizya was obligatory were strong in armaments at the end of the age. So they withheld what they used to pay in jizya, kharaj, and the like. Muslim Bashar and Nawawi, Volume 9, p. 219. These are the four meanings mentioned by the scholars, especially the meaning of these two hadiths. That is, there are four possible meanings, but the most common is the second meaning, as mentioned by an-Nawawi. So what is meant by embargo in the hadith is that the Ajam and Roman nations have taken control of the Muslim lands, and they have prevented the Muslims from enjoying their own resources. Note that in the first hadith there is an amazing hint that the embargo on Iraq was imposed by the Ajam, that is, the so-called Orientals, or non-Arabs, or people who do not use Arabic as a language in their daily dialogue. As for its relationship with the Levant, the embargo was only carried out by the Romans. Meanwhile, the word Roman does not refer to a particular society, and in general, the term Roman is more intended for Christians and Westerners. This kind of understanding, especially for Iraq, has occurred during the barbarian attacks from the Tatars. The Tatars are a people whose very existence is confirmed by what is written in the Ajam language. As for the brutal attacks of the Roman Crusaders against the Levant, they may be what is meant by the meaning of the hadith above. There is some truth in this possibility, and there is also a broader possibility. The second hadith hints at a blockade around Iraq, as a prelude to an embargo on Iraq from attempts to bring to them essential commodities from Islamic countries and beyond. The same condition was to befall the Levant for the second time, so the narrator of these two hadiths linked these two embargoes to the descent of the Mahdi at the end of time. The correlation made by the narrator, in this case a companion, indicates that Islam will re-emerge on the international scene as an unrivaled superpower for the second time. Moreover, the first hadith states that Islam will return to its former glory, as it did in the early days. From this perspective, we can say that the alienation of Islam and its teachings for the second time will find significant symptoms as a sign of the beginning of the Islamic international revival. 2. The symptoms will begin with the increasingly weak condition of the Muslim Ummah amidst the stranglehold of the power of all the al-Balil on earth. This alienation has not occurred completely, but in our own time. Is it related to the cruel embargo imposed on Iraq to begin with? In fact, it is happening in our time as well. In turn, the embargo will be imposed on the Levant and then on Egypt. It seems that this episode of Hadith News is still continuing. It can be said that the embargo on Iraq is the beginning of embargoes against other Muslim countries. This means that what the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, had foretold in his hadith has come true, but has not yet reached its climax. In addition, we can also interpret that the embargo imposed on the Levant was only carried out by the Romans. As for Iraq, in general, it can be said that the embargo against it can be implemented, because it has the blessing and support of most countries in the world, or what we know as the United Nations. They are actually very fitting to be called Ajam, non-Arab. This is because the meaning of Ajam is broader than the meaning of Aram, which only includes the Romans and other non-Arabic nations. As for the embargo against Sham, it was only carried out by the Roman nation, without involving the support of other countries. Thus, according to the explanation above, it can be concluded that the episode of the sign is still continuing. Therefore, it is true that this sign of the Day of Judgment has not yet occurred perfectly. 2. Siege of Medina. Ibn Omar, may Allah be pleased with him, reported that the Messenger of Allah, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The time is approaching when the Muslims will be besieged up to Medina, to the extent that their last refuge will be in Salahi." As Zuhri said, The place called Salahi is near Khabar. Sahih Lunyu Hibban, 15174. Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, reported, "The time is very near when the Muslims will be besieged in Medina, until their last defense will be in the area of Salahi." Ahmad, Baki Musnad al-Mukatsirin, Hadith No. 9238. Foreign vocabulary, az lihu. The original meaning is armory. Later on, it also came to mean the military base used to defend the city. In the context of this hadith, the limit of the military fortifications that the Muslims managed to build to defend the city of Medina was only up to the Salahi area, which is located only a few miles from Khabar. This Tangsi, apart from serving as a place to defend, could also be used to attack. Ibn Atsir said, "The word al-Masali is the plural of al-Mazla. The word al-Masali is the plural of al-Mazla, while the word al-Muzala is used to refer to those who are armed to protect military positions from enemy attack. It is so called because of their appearance, which always bears weapons. Or it could also mean people who inhabit defense forts that look like forts to keep an eye on incoming enemies. This is so that they can be aware of the enemy's arrival and be prepared to fight back." On Al-Mabad, BJ8LB11, p. 321. Explanation: this hadith indicates the completion of the disbelievers' pressure on the Muslims, to the extent that they all fled to the city of the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. This happened at the end of time during the siege of Medina. The farthest limit of the Muslim stronghold was Salahi, which is close to Khabar, while Khabar itself is about 160 kilometers from the center of Medina. In the hadith above, there is a hint that the enemy is getting closer to the city of Medina, as well as a hint that the goal of the disbelievers is to capture the city itself. As for when the siege occurred, it cannot be known for certain. However, some scholars stated that this event took place during the time of Dajjal. This is as stated by Sheikh Abdul Haq ad-Dalawi, when he said, "According to the plain meaning, the news about the fate of the Muslims will occur in the time of Dajjal, when they will all flee to Medina al-Muthahara. However, this does not rule out the possibility that it will happen at another time." What ad-Dalawi predicts is also true. This is reinforced by the fact that the word al-Masali is also mentioned in the hadiths about Dajjal, namely al-Masali ad-Daljal, which means the detachment of pioneers and scouts from the army of Dajjal. It is as if the term had become a general term at that time. Based on this understanding, it can be said that the Muslims at the beginning of the attack of Dajjal and his army were confident that they would be able to repel their enemy. However, it seemed that the enemy had the upper hand over the Muslims, so the Muslims realized that they would not be able to do as expected. So the Muslims fled to the city of Medina. At the same time, the angels jumped in to defend the city of Medina al-Munawwara, the city that Allah honored. Of course, the above opinion is based on the scientific method of Sheikh ad-Dalawi. However, in our opinion, such a prediction is still very weak, when considering the evidence that states that the Muslims will defend themselves in the center of Medina. As for the hadiths related to the Dajjal, none of them mention that the Dajjal will attack Medina. Rather, this war will not take place except in Palestine. This is what can be seen from the hadiths of the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, about the Dajjal and the events associated with him, such as sieges, food blockades and wars, in which the name of the Dajjal is mentioned. As for the hadiths that do not mention Dajjal in their wording, most of them indicate that these events are independent signs of the hour and do not occur during the time of Dajjal. Therefore, it can be said that this hadith indicates that the enemy of the Muslims at that time will not be the Dajjal, but another enemy. Hence, we find Sheikh ad-Dalawi concluding his commentary with the words, "This does not rule out the possibility of this happening in another age, not the time of the Dajjal." This is why we have oriented the interpretation of this hadith, so that it has a close connection with recent events. As is well known, The Zionist Jews are very ambitious to obtain the land of Khabur, which was once the home of their ancestors. It is evident that in the Jewish protocols, the land of Khabur is included in the mapping for the establishment of the state of Greater Israel. Until now, the various attacks they have launched have reached the limit of dividing the unity of Muslims, especially Arab countries. According to the news we heard, this invasion will also spread to Egypt and Saudi Arabia. May Allah protect these two countries from the deception of their enemies. So is it likely to be like the description above, which indicates that the Arab countries will be divided, which Israel then uses as a pretext to secure its borders and power, so that in the end, what was originally intended to defend the borders will now become an expansion of the territory. The facts do show this. This is proven by the various colonizations that have now been carried out by Israel against Arab countries.